Jazakallah khair to everyone for being here pretty early on a Saturday morning. We definitely appreciate that. This is definitely going to be an interesting event. So I'm glad that you were all able to make it. I actually personally have known Hamza for a while. And so they asked me to obviously give an intro for him. For anyone who doesn't know Hamza, which is highly unlikely if you have if you have a LinkedIn account, he's a recent grad from UC Berkeley. I believe he studied data science, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, he studied data science. He interned, I believe, 10 or 12 times during his time at Berkeley for some of the top companies, including Tesla, Google, Salesforce. And currently he's working as a product manager. And his positions in those internships were initially, they started off as software engineers, and then slowly towards the end, he transitioned to product management. And so currently he's working as a PM at Ripcord, I believe, which is I believe it's a hyper growth startup. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, Hamza.
No, you got it.
Okay, perfect. So that's a little bit about Hamza. I'll let him kind of give a better intro of himself once he begins talking. Just brief, kind of gist of this event for those of you who might not know. It's basically talking about, he's going to be talking about the career ladder and how you're not necessarily limited to just one field. Just because you start off in a certain position doesn't mean you have to stick to that position. And we've kind of seen that already with the brief intro that I gave him. Hamza started off as a software engineer intern at a lot of these companies, and then slowly transitioned into product management, and that's what he's currently pursuing full time. So with that said, Hamza, I'll let you take it away. This is all you, basically, man.
Okay, thanks so much, Hassan. Really appreciate it. And just curious, is the format going to be like a Q&A kind of thing, or is that going to be at the end? Because I have slides. Should I just go over that like uninterrupted? Or because like I'm happy to have you chime in as well, but is there like your own agenda pre-Q&A?
No, man, I think we can kind of just freestyle this, whatever you feel is better. If you want to kind of go through the slides and take questions at the end, you can do that. And then for the participants, you guys are more than welcome to just drop questions in the chat if you feel like you don't want to interrupt him or whatever, while he's speaking with the slides on. But Hamza, if you're willing to take questions, you can kind of pause at the end of every 2-3 slides or so if you want, and kind of just ask questions if you feel that works for you. If not, we can definitely do questions at the end. It's whatever is comfortable for you.
We can do at the end as well, but I'll just stop at like a few key slides and ask if anyone wants to clarify, because some of the things might be confusing at first. So we'll do a mix of both.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Okay, so I'll share my screen right now. Let's see. Okay, let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
All right, and it's still good, right?
Yeah, perfect.
And quick thing, can someone record this for future reference, Hassan?
I believe it's already being recorded. I think it is already it's being recorded. I'm getting a thing on my screen saying that it's recorded. So
okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think in the chat someone from the committee mentioned it's being recorded. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, so let's get started. The career ladder. There it is. Okay, so these are the table of contents today. We're gonna first cover like the ladder, and I know a lot of people that are, in the Minterns group or that are at this hackathon through like just hearing about it through friends. They're doing a whole like diverse set of positions. People aren't just doing software engineering. People aren't just doing product management. They're also doing consulting. They're also doing just entrepreneurship. They're like founders of their own startup. Many different roles, right? They may be doing design as well. So the ladder is not limited to any role. I'm going to describe like a generic ladder, and then I'm going to cover ladders specifically for a lot of the more common positions. So like software and product, for example. So that's what number one is. And then after that, we'll discuss what happens up top, and what that means is we'll just discuss like what it means to be like director or above, because that's something that a lot of interns and even like software engineering managers don't have too much insight on, because it's like very high up, especially in large companies where you can have like 3 to 4 different levels or reports between like a manager and like a director. So this will give us an insight on and based off of many people that I've interviewed and based off of like some family friends, it's pretty interesting and very different what happens at the top versus what happens at the bottom, even if they're working on the same products. And then lastly, exit opportunities. What this means, if this is not a familiar word, it just means like if you start off as a software engineer, what can you do in the future? If you start off as a PM, there's like, these are all the different things that you can do. and not even like 20 years from now, even like sooner than that too. So it's just essentially, it's not limiting you in a sense, but because you can still do anything, right? But these are the common exit routes from a given position in the tech industry. So the ladder, what happens up top, and exit opportunities. So we're going to start off with the ladder. So we're going to discuss the technical path first. The technical path is essentially, wait, let's just go a little forward. Where's the, okay, it looks like that slide is, oh, here's the slide right here. So there are two paths. When you're a software engineer, you can go kind of to the right. And the reason why it's more to the right instead of up is because technically you're not like a director or a VP. You're just going down the technical path, which means you're essentially, I mean, I'll explain it more like in the next couple of slides. So that just means you're getting more deep with your technical knowledge and the implementation of a lot of concepts. And whereas the managerial path is you're just going towards like the C-suite, right? Whether it be CTO, CIO, or CSO on a technical level. So these are the two different paths you can take as a software engineer. I've heard a lot of people saying, "Oh man, I want to rise up as soon as possible," because you know they have a lot of people skills and they don't like coding that much, and they're starting as a software engineer. Then you want to take the left path, the managerial path. Whereas if you just absolutely love coding and you see yourself doing that for 5+ years, then you want to take the technical path to some degree, right? Okay, so we're going to discuss the technical path in a little bit more detail and show you all the levels to it. So here's the path, and if we start off at the bottom, Hassan, can you just confirm that you can see my mouse?
Yeah, I can see it.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. So you start off as a software engineer, and this is typically a position that like requires 0 to 3 years of experience before you're required to interview for like the next position or until you like get promoted to the next position. Software engineer essentially just builds software products and does this based off of like the requirement from their managers or from the product manager that's working in adjacence with their team, right? So very simple. Everyone knows what a software engineer is. And then after 3 years, if you're doing well and you're technically sharp and you're growing and learning, then they promote you to a senior software engineer, which is between 3 and 6 years of experience typically. And a senior software engineer does the exact same thing as a software engineer. They simply build products and they do a lot of the implementation of like the PM's ideas, a lot of like, kind of superficial stuff, integrations between two different like softwares or APIs or tools. And they really like just basically do in a sense, like the dirty work of the software, right? If there's something that needs to be built, like for example, if there's a new Snapchat feature, like a new filter that needs to be like made, right? They'll make it, right? Or if you need to like add like a certain icon to like the Snapchat like messaging, the messaging like page of the user flow, then they'll add that. And now we're going to get on to senior or staff software engineer, which is, as I mentioned, like software engineer is 0 to 3 years, senior software engineer is 3 to 6 years, and then staff software engineer is about like 7 to 9 years. And what does the word staff here mean? Basically, you've been doing software engineering for a while, and at this point, you don't want to do like the simple implementation of like a feature request. You don't want to be adding buttons. You don't want to be like just like working on a little bit on like the superficial messaging API or just like calling APIs that other people have built. You want to actually do some interesting stuff. And when I say interesting stuff, I mean more like design and architecture. So if we look at staff and senior staff, what both of these positions do is they work on design and architecture. Example of that is, okay, Snapchat's scaling super quickly. And we need to have more servers. We need to have like a better database. We need to have, both a database for like files and images and also like a NoSQL database, right? For data. So you start thinking of like, oh, we can use DynamoDB like in AWS for like a NoSQL database. And we can use like something else like AWS, like S3 buckets for like file and image storage, right? So those are examples of like different ways to store data. And you're thinking, okay, we can do that, but how is that going to interface with like the UI, right? And how's it going to really quickly go, right? Do we have to use something like Ingress to like to throttle traffic or to make sure that everything in our software cluster, our mesh of microservices is fully fine? See, like this is getting pretty detailed. This is stuff you don't learn in undergrad. It's something you have to build up to. And it's something that a lot of software engineers, and you may not realize this right now, but they really love this because this is the architecture. This is the brains behind everything. Once they decide with like a flow chart, like they have like wires going from one box to another, that this database is going to connect to that database. And both of these are going to connect to like Ingress. And then like the user is going to see everything over here. They have that architecture flow drawn out. Then they hand it off to the people that are under them, senior software engineers or software engineers. and they're actually implementing it. So they're just like kind of blindly saying, okay, I'm just gonna like connect this database with that database because that's what like the staff software engineer told me to, right? That's what the person like with the architecture who made the architecture kind of like told me to do. So there's implementation at the bottom, and then there's like the brains behind the implementation. Sometimes people that are senior staff software engineers and staff software engineers, they're writing very minimal code. Actually, it's pretty surprising to a lot of people our age. Like, how are they writing little code, but they're like one of the top software engineers because they're doing like the thinking behind it. So now if we go higher up, we have principal software engineer and architect. You can group these two together because they have a very similar day-to-day role. What these guys do is they write almost no code. And if they do write code, it's because everyone under them is unable to solve a problem. It's such a challenging and tough problem that they bring it to them. And they've seen things like this in the past because they've either been at this same company for like 20 to like 25 years and they've grown too. If you're at a company for 20 years but you barely grow, you're not going to pass senior software engineer or staff software engineer. If you're constantly growing, learning, getting smarter, and you're really quick on your feet, then you can hit these top two levels, which is, it's pretty rare in general. If someone's like distinguished to that point, people come to them for the most difficult and the most challenging problems. And when no one's coming to them for, oh, this is bug that no one on an organization has been able to solve, when no one's coming to them for those requests, what they do is they do like a little bit of kind of incubation or exploration of like new avant-garde, like cutting edge concepts. Like let's say for Snapchat, before like filters were a thing, like the architect might be like, let's see if we can use computer vision to like identify like people's facial features on the screen and like do something cool with that, right? That's something that an architect may have like thought of like a moonshot idea and like tested it out with some new ML, like computer vision libraries, like OpenCV and stuff, and realize like, wait, there's something here, we can actually do something. And then when they think of that, they like design it a little bit, then they pass it down to the people towards the bottom, and the software engineers and senior software engineers implement that kind of idea. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, like just to go through like the years, 0 to 3 years for a software engineer, 3 to 6 for senior, and then like about 7 to 9 for staff, and then 9 to 13 for senior staff, and then 13 plus for these two. And architect is a very thrown around term because there's like there's many different job titles, including job titles you can get right out of undergrad that have architect in it, right? Solutions architect, architect consultant, like all these different things. And that's not what we're talking about here. Right here, we're talking about like software architect, and you'll know when someone's a software architect because you can see that they've been at that same company for like 13, 14 years, or they've been at another place for such a long time and they just came over here as an architect. These people definitely like, have very, very high salaries and they solve the most difficult problems and they're highly respected at every single company. So just going back, we covered this technical path towards the right, and now we're going to be going up the managerial path, which is, I kind of feel like everyone's here for that. So let's get into it. The managerial path is a path straight to the CTO, right? Everyone wants to be in the C-suite. Everyone wants to be an executive. Then they do this. So software engineer, again, like I don't have to spell out the number of years for this because it varies a lot from company to company. You start as a software engineer, and there's about 6 to 7 software engineers on average reporting to an engineering manager, also known as an EM, at companies like Google and et cetera. And EM has control of 6 to 7 software engineers that are directly reporting to them. They control their salary, and everyone at the second level or above is known as a people manager, right? Where they don't write code themselves. They manage people that write code, and they make sure that there's requirements that are satisfied, quality requirements and product related requirements, feature requirements, and they bring all of that to their boss. So the engineering manager brings it to like the senior engineering manager. And one thing that I want to denote is as startups, you don't have this entire hierarchy, this hierarchy. And just for the sake of showing you, like, this is the worst case hierarchy that you'll expect. If you want to be a CTO, you have to go through all of this in the worst case. But generally as startups, you'll go from software engineer to sometimes there will be like a engineering manager, straight to director of software engineering, straight to like SVP of SWE, and then you'll have CTO. So you won't have more than four levels like at a startup generally, because startups are pretty small. When you start getting past 1,000 people, then you might see a couple more of these things coming in. And when you're at something like Salesforce or Google, I remember checking the hierarchy, and this is exactly what it was, right? So engineering manager has 6 to 7 software engineers reporting to them. And at a company with like a super hierarchical and really structured ladder, you have engineering managers reporting to senior engineering managers. So let's say about, I think 3 to 4 of them typically report to like a senior engineering manager. And then this is where you make that big title jump to director. You have 3 to 4 engineering managers reporting to a director of software engineering. And then same thing for that. And then you get to vice president. This is another title jump. And this title jump is actually pretty significant. When you go from director to vice president, a lot of people consider this like the executive step, right? I can discuss this like there's also like the next slide where I tell you about what happens up top, what people even do up top. When I say up top, I mean people that are usually senior director and above, right? But usually when you go from senior director to vice president, one of the expectations is that you'll just be traveling a lot, right? There's a lot of customer interaction. Think about it. There's people writing code under you, but what happens when that code's written? It becomes a feature. What happens when those features all get batched together and they're solid? That becomes a product. What happens when a whole suite of products get put into like one box? That's something that your customer can literally buy and pay like let's say like a monthly SaaS model, right? Like $1,000 per user a month or something, right? And how are you gonna even get those customers, right? Is that gonna be like the job of just the CEO? No, the CEO has a lot of things to worry about, such as like lawsuits, legal, and like a bunch of other stuff. So these vice presidents have to go interact with customers and be like, hey, you should actually get our product. I have teams under me that are building these awesome things. I think it would bring a lot of value to your company. So that's what the vice president and above does. And that's why there's a lot of traveling. Sometimes they travel at least 1 week out of like the 4-week month. And it honestly just increases as you go higher up in many cases at many companies. So then you have senior vice president of software engineering. And here's an interesting thing up here. A lot of people wouldn't expect this second top tier to be here. But it is here because at a company like Salesforce, that is so large, right? Around 50,000 employees, and especially companies like Microsoft, you can't have senior vice presidents reporting to the CTO. And you know why? It's because there's like 50 to 100 of these guys, right? So what happens is they need to add another layer in between here to kind of like straddle it. And what they do is it's tough for them to repeat a lot of positions, right? It's not a good look to have senior vice presidents reporting to more senior vice presidents that report to more senior vice presidents. Then it's like, yo, it'll take forever these guys to get to like the next title, right? You want to give them some hope, AKA like a little change in title. So what they do is they call it executive vice president, right? This it's called EVP, which like is obviously better than SVP or just VP. And usually when you're an EVP, you're at the level where you're so high up, like under the CTO. Remember, CTOs own all the tech in the company. Typically, large companies have not just one, but a suite of products, right? Like, for example, like we talked about Snapchat earlier, and we can continue talking about Snapchat. Snapchat, like back in the day, they had not only the Snapchat app, they had the Snapchat app for iOS, for Android. They also had like the Snap goggles or glasses, right? That's 3 things right there. You really think that like those 3 things are all going to be owned by just like one EVP? No, they're going to be split up, right? There's going to be an executive vice president for like the Snapchat goggles, right? And then also for Snapchat, a separate one for Snapchat mobile and iOS. And these people are known as GMs as well, because they're owning one huge product that has millions of users and that everyone looks at as like that's an independent product. So we're going to talk about this later on how you can become a GM. But GMs, the really interesting thing about this is you own something that's really big and you're the CEO of a big product within a big company. So at Salesforce, there's like a GM for, and this is exactly how it was. You go all the way to executive vice president, and you notice that they also have a comma GM next to their title at Salesforce. And what does that mean? That means like they're the GM of Sales Cloud, of Service Cloud, of a Marketing Cloud. Those are like the 3 big clouds. And then there's like a few peripheral products such as like Commerce Cloud, right? There's like Einstein Analytics, and then Einstein's embedded across every single cloud. But basically, that GM and EVP route is only present in large companies. And you're probably thinking like, okay, at Google and Microsoft, which is like one of the, if not the like largest company employee-wise, how is it possible to just have these levels without repeating? Well, guess what? They have another hack that they do if they want to have more levels than this. What they do is, if you look at my cursor, what they have is they have director, and then they have senior director. And then you know how I mentioned this is a big title jump to go from director to, and then like just a change in the name to vice president. What they do is they add another level called group director. So you have a bunch of senior directors reporting there. And you can add that word group to anywhere, group vice president, group senior vice president, and that adds another level in the hierarchy. And thus it adds, let's see, what is that? It adds 8 more levels right there, because there's like, 8 things before the CTO over here. So that right there is another hack for very large companies to make people feel like they're still getting promoted, although they're still really far from CTO. So this is the career ladder, and you're probably wondering like, I don't want to go through a lot of this. Let's see how we can quickly rise up, and what does my path look as a software engineer, and do I have to go up this path? Answer is like absolutely not. There's like at least 4 to 5 things that are really cool that you can do. So before that, let's discuss what happens over here up top. So senior director and above, remember these roles are very different than the ones below. Why is that? It's because of, number 1, budgeting. Let's say we're at Snapchat, and let's say there's directors that are owning many different parts of the user flow. Okay, let's say that there's a director that's that's in charge of Snapchat messages, another director that's in charge of like the Snapchat like video calling feature, right? Making sure like the video streaming service is like is very smooth, right? Another director who's in charge of like the one of the main things, which is filters when you take a picture, right? And then like a director who's in charge of like just like sending and making sure it's like low latency and the message quickly goes from like user A to user B, right? Those are the 4 directors. So what happens is above that director, the VP is like, okay, I have to really worry about budgeting for 2021. And they're probably already thinking about this stuff in 2020. And this is something that software engineers don't have to worry about. They're just told to do something and the budget for them is already accounted for. But who budgets their salary and who budgets like their project, meaning that they can buy this subscription of like this library to use in their code? Who worries about that? The people, senior director and above typically. So that VP has to be like, okay, I have all these directors under me. Who am I going to give the budget to? And they think in terms of the number of users, like how hot that product is, and how much resources, like how many resources are required to get it done. So that VP at Snapchat, let's say VP of like products, for example, is going to think, okay, I want to give most of my budget, I want to allocate it towards that director of Snapchat filters at the first page, because everyone uses that and that's like super hot. And if that has like less funding, people are just going to stop using Snapchat, right? People don't even go to the messaging sometimes until they just quickly take a picture like in the morning and send like, a filtered picture, right? So he's going to allocate a lot of his money to that in terms of like the budget. And these guys have really big budgets, which is very, very interesting because I don't think I wrote it here. So I guess it was under budgeting, which is when you're high up and in your budgeting, even though you're in the software ladder, you're just like, you grow up writing code and you write code until you hit like, the engineering manager level. A lot of your job is about finance, which is really unintuitive. You're like, I've never done this before. So the higher up you go, and when you get to CTO, a lot of it is like reading like, balance sheets and just like the revenue statements and then things like that, and using that to make informed decisions about where you're going to put your budget and which like director under you you're going to give more funding to for this upcoming fiscal year, right? So that's budgeting. People skills are really huge. And I literally wrote people skills are huge here because as you go higher up, again, you're a people manager. From engineering manager, let me go to the slide. From second level all the way to the top level. Are you managing code? No, you're managing people. You're only managing code when you're at the second level because the software engineers under you are actually shipping code on a weekly basis. So above that, what you're doing is your life looks very different. You have one-on-ones with about like 5 to 6 people that directly report to you. And by the way, that's the typical convention. Like wherever you are, like if you're second level or above, you have about 5 to 6 people reporting to you. It's too much of a headache to have more people. It's tough to like paralyze and still make them feel like they're your friend and your employee that has a good relationship with you by having one-on-ones with them. It's tough to do that for more people. But fun fact, Elon Musk has like over 20, 25 direct reports because he's just, he's crazy like that. But generally, if you have 5 to 6, that's normal. If you have 10, then you're hyper productive. Anything more than that is like, it's kind of unheard of, right? So just a little side tangent. People skills are huge. You have to have one-on-ones with people. You have to keep them happy. Otherwise, they're going to talk to your manager like 2 levels up above them and just complain, or they're just going to like give you bad performance reviews and like the anonymous 360 reviews that happen these days. And you just need to keep everyone happy. So it's important to just have not only people skills, but people skills where you're just like kind of pleasant to be around, right? So that's important at the executive level. Third thing is presentation and demo skills. What are you doing higher up when you're higher up? Like for example, in Snapchat, let's say you're like the director of software engineering for Snapchat filters, right? Let's say your peer is the director of software engineering for, what was the other thing, like the messaging service, right? Both of you want a good budget, and of course, like the VP of product is going to ask you to like pitch why you guys should get like a good budget, or even just a casual demo. He's not going to say like, oh, you're pitching for a budget, but that if I do really well on this, he's going to give me more funding for my team and allow me to increase my headcount, aka hire more people in the next year. So you guys, like you and like the other director, are just going to go really hard with your presentations. You're going to make all the demos look flawless and smooth. And what happens afterwards? The VP is going to be like, you know what? Based off of this guy's numbers of like monthly active users, I think Snapchat filters are just popping way more than like everything else. This guy's going to get the majority of the budget. Presentation and demo skills are really, really key, right? So making sure that you have public speaking skills. A lot of executives literally take classes that are sometimes sponsored by the company to increase their speaking skill level and so that they can really be successful internally, and also when talking to customers externally, so they can pull them in and increase their revenue, right? Fourth thing, alignment with upper management. This is just really important because when you're a software engineer, you don't know what the CTO wants. You don't know what the VP wants. But when you're like even an engineering manager, you kind of catch wind of what the people up top want. And if you're doing something that they don't want, let's say like you're just building something random like Snapchat, like shopping, they're gonna be like, that was not like in our business school. That was not like in our 5-month plan or even our 5-year plan. Get rid of that. You have to restart and just like scrap that product, wasted a lot of money. You need to be aligned with what upper management always wants. That's very, very key. Last thing is being able to abstract without getting too technical. This is a problem that a lot of people at the second level right here at engineering managers, they were just software engineers. They just got promoted. They're so used to just talking about things that are super technical. When they talk to like their report, who they report to, which is, let's say, like the director in this case, the director's gonna be like, I don't want to hear any about any of those details. Don't mention the word Postgres to me. Okay. Don't mention the word like ingress to me. I don't want to hear that. Just like tell me about when you'll have the deadline done, and tell me about like what this thing does. Is it a storage service, like a database, or is it something else? You don't need to get into like the code with me, right? That gets increasingly emphasized as you get to CTO, right? The CTO is not going to be like, what's happening in line 33 of the code? No, they're just going to be like, all right, you want to go into the shopping space? Let's just do a little bit of research there, right? That's what the CTO will be telling the GM under them, right? It's like that high level. So these are like the 5 things. And one thing that I heard this quote from someone: if you want to be promoted to the next level, look at the responsibilities that like the person at the next level is doing and just start doing that already. So your manager's going to be like, wait, I might as well just like promote him from like, let's say software engineer to senior software engineer, or senior to staff, because you're already taking on the responsibilities. You're already mentoring young software engineering interns. Might as well just promote him. It won't be any different, right? So always apply the skills, and for management, might as well apply a lot of these skills right here, right? You can have great demo skills. You can like kind of have an idea of what upper management's doing and stick with it. And you can like abstract when you're talking to someone non-technical, like a sales guy or like a marketing lady, right? That's like something that you can just start doing right off the bat. So make sure to always do whatever you want to have the position of. That's very key. Last thing, exit opportunities. And by the way, Hassan, do you have any questions so far? Or does anyone have any questions? I realized that I went kind of fast.
I think the chat seems, I don't think there's any questions. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to just, again, drop them in the chat, or right now, if you want to just turn your mic on and ask. I believe, or unless, actually, I'm not sure if everyone has the ability to unmute themselves. I'm not sure. So if you guys want to be unmuted, just let me know and I can unmute you guys. If not, we can just move on and then have questions at the end.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and I think the chat works well. We can all see that. Okay, so moving on. We're going to discuss exit opportunities. If you start off as a software engineer, what can you do? And actually a bunch of things. I've only showed you one path, or 2 paths for software engineer: the super technical path, the architect, and higher up, straight up path to the CTO. So let's see what you can do as a software engineer. I just discussed 2, but there's actually 4 things that you can do. And these 4, it's not limited to 4, it's many more. I just wrote the most popular exit opportunities. So if you're a software engineer, as I mentioned, you can go SWE, senior SWE, staff SWE, architect. If you're a SWE leader, also, by the way, I'm writing SWE because at Google, everyone called software engineers SWE. Everyone called like every position like an abbreviation, just so it was super quick to like talk about a bunch of stuff. So if you just walk into Google, you'll just be like, what is everyone talking about? It's a completely different language, like alien. So it takes some time to get used to it, but might as well just use an acronym. It's faster. So the second thing is a SWE leader. I discussed this with the second path, the one that had many more positions: SWE manager, SWE director, all the way to chief technology officer, right? And let's say you have a security focus. For example, if you're a security engineer, you're not going to go to CTO, right? You're going to go to like the chief security officer, or sometimes like the CISO, chief information security officer, right? So there's many different tracks, right? But if you're a pure software engineer, everyone wants to be a CTO basically. So that's the second path. Data scientist. This is something we have not discussed yet in this presentation. If you want to be a data scientist, there's many ways to do it. A lot of people go straight from SWE to a data scientist, but this is like the more guaranteed path, where you start doing a little bit of machine learning, whether it be on the side, like with a different team on like, like a 20 or 30% of your time dedicated to that, or you kind of transition so that your main project that you're doing under your manager has some data science in it. Right? And sometimes they may call you an ML engineer, especially if you're working on like a lot of infrastructure that supports machine learning, data scientists, machine learning, like kind of like workflows, right? So you can do an ML engineering kind of job. And then this actually is a little unfortunate, but it really helps these days to separate yourself, to break into data science, to get a master's, right? So if you still feel like, oh, I'm an ML engineer, but it's still tough for me to actually get data science, like actual data science work, and I want people to notice me more, and whether it be in your company to like get promoted to data scientist, or whether it be to go to a different company, a master's may be the move. You got a master's, you come back, your people at your company respect you way more because now you're one level up compared to like the software engineers that all like are just like pleading to be a data scientist, right? That's something that whether it be a degree or not, it separates you from everyone else. So that's the data scientist path. And by the way, data scientists, a lot of people want to be the data scientist for many different reasons. Like a lot of the use cases for data science are very, very interesting, right? Like predicting house prices, right? Or recommendations for, let's say, like Facebook Messenger, who you're going to chat with, right? Or even like things that are more in the computer vision space, right? Like Snapchat filters that are just like more and more cutting edge, right? Detecting like moving parts like in the screen and stuff like that. Those things are what data scientists do as well. And it's a different type of data scientist. So there's a lot of very interesting stuff. And of course, the pay is a lot higher than software engineers if you're a legitimate data scientist. Last thing is entrepreneur. A lot of people don't really consider this, but if you're a software engineer and you're like, I don't want to listen to a boss anymore. I'm tired of reporting to someone. And I don't have to do this from the age of like 22 to like 65, right? You don't want to do that for like 43 years. You're just going to be like, I want to start my own company, right? You start your own company, but you're a coder, you're a founder, but you're the founding engineer. And if you're a founding engineer and you end up going towards an exit means IPO or acquisition. Basically, everyone on your team gets like a huge payout when you get bought out by a larger company or go public. You make a lot of money, right? So a lot of people don't realize that, oh, I'm a software engineer, I can't be a founder. I need to have like a PM or someone that's like has more business acumen, like an MBA, be a founder. No, in fact, engineers are the best founders, assuming you have social skills as well, because then you have the best of both worlds, right? You have the business and you have the tech. People that just have the business, they need an engineer under them, and the fewer people, the better, right? I'd rather have a team of like just 2 or 3 instead of a team of 10 where all 10 are just doing completely different things and there's no overlap, right? So an example of a SWE gone entrepreneur is my friend Zuhair Musa. Everyone's heard of him. He's the founder of levels.fyi. And he started off as like a software engineering intern at Uber, worked on a few software projects here and there. And then he was like, I just want to start my own company. So he started a company. He started a startup. It got some users, but it didn't get that many. So he started another one, almost got no users, started another one, and it got a few users. And then he went to the next one, but then he was like, wait, the one I just started before is starting to get a lot of traction. A lot of people are using the salary website. It started getting so much that he started focusing on that, as a full-time role. Didn't get a job and like a proper job, but now this Levels FI is making a lot of money for him, right? And he's the founding engineer, as it mentions right here, and it's just him and another engineer, and they both have like kind of some business acumen, so they don't need like an MBA there, they don't need like a product manager for them, they don't need like a non-technical CEO. They can do everything themselves, right? And they have actually gotten acquisition offers, by the way, and he's living a good life because, as I mentioned, one of the motivations to go down this fourth path is you don't want to report to anyone, you don't want to have a boss. So he's his own boss. He wakes up whenever he wants, and you know how he knows what to do next? He reads his emails, which is feedback, and some customers like, hey, build this feature out, and he can go like, nah. Oh, that's dope. And that's what he works on that day when he wakes up at whatever time he wants. So that's an amazing life. And know that you're not limited by being a software engineer. You can do that as well. So PM is something that I'm doing, and this is something a lot of people aspire to do. So when you're aspiring to do something, it's very important to look at the exit opportunities, because if there aren't any, then why go into that field, right? So if you're a product manager, you can become a product leader, which is just ascending the ladder. Just imagine the same ladder that you saw earlier, except instead of like director of software, it's director of product. So that's like the product leader path. And then there's there's no like technical path necessarily for a product manager where you become like some architect product manager. So don't worry about that. But there is like a GM opportunity. What is a GM? A GM is a general manager. Remember how I mentioned that reporting to the CTO of Snapchat, there could be the head of Snap Goggles, the head of Snapchat for iOS, and the head of Snapchat for Android, right? All 3 of those are like standalone products that require completely independent work from the other ones. They have different code bases, right? iOS and Android. So would you call that person like a EVP of engineering just by themselves? No, you'd also call them a GM because they're the CEO of a product under like the CEO of the company, right? So when people say, oh, you're a PM, you're a CEO of a product, yeah, you are, but you don't actually feel like a CEO until you have like 50 or 100 people under you. And that's what a GM looks like. He or she owns their own product, and they have like a bunch of people that support them and build out whatever they want, because they're at like the EVP level or like the VP level, or sometimes even director level if like the company, if you're like a GM of like a smaller product. Which, by the way, this is like a small like side tangent. I've seen people that become GMs at the age of like 33, 34, because they're just like rising up like they're rising up a ladder, and they're working on a product that a lot of people don't really know about at the company. It's like a small, like, mysterious product, and there's like a very small like number of people there. So they rise up to become a GM at the age of like 32, 33. And then because they have the title GM, they go to another company as like a senior director or vice president about 10 to 15 years early, because they were a GM before. So although they were a GM with just like 10, 15, like, or like 7 or 8 years of experience, the fact that they had that title really boosted them later on, because you can't be they don't give GM to like a product manager. They don't give GM to like even a director of product. Sometimes you have to like really earn it. You have to be heading not just one feature, not just like a small product, but a pretty sizable product. So if you have the opportunity to like head like a pretty big product, then you can make a case like, hey, can I also have general manager in my title? That'll really help you for rising up in that company, or even going to a different company and owning something huge like that too, right? Like let's say you own something super small, like a document scanner on Salesforce Einstein. That's what I worked on, right? But let's say I really took that to the next level, and I became like the GM of that, and there's just 10 people on my team. I could literally go to something like Xerox and be like the GM for a document scanner, and Xerox is a ton of people. I would have like 500 people under me. I would be a GM and a VP. So that right there is a huge come up, and being a GM gives you the opportunity for that. So PM to GM is very, very doable, and something that a lot of people have done. So again, PM, director of PM, and then you become a GM of like, let's say Snapchat messaging, which people can argue is a standalone product, but I should have actually put like the Snapchat iOS here. That makes more sense. VC investor, a lot of people have asked me about this. They want to write checks to startups, and they want to do it very soon. If you want to do it very, very soon, the path is not PM. The path is to be an entrepreneur. We're going to cover that in 2 slides. So if you want to go from PM to VC investor, here's the thing. When you're working for someone at a company, you're always going to be growing slower than if you were at your own company and it became the next Facebook. Everyone knows that, right? But people don't want to have the risk, and thus they're working on large companies. So the growth is slower. And thus when you come into a VC firm, like if you look over here, PM, senior PM, then you come into a VC firm, you're coming in as an associate. You're not coming in as like a partner or a general partner or even like a principal, which those 3 like write checks. You're coming in as like an associate, which essentially does sourcing, right? You're scouting for startups, finding the best ones and forwarding them up to partners, or you're doing due diligence, just making sure that what the partners are about to write checks to, those startups, are not scams, and that everything on like their slide deck actually lines up with the actual metrics and logs like in their code, right? So that's something right there that you need to keep in mind. PM to VC, you're going to come in at the bottom of the firm, and there's a chance you won't make it to the top. It's a hierarchy. Not everyone from the bottom of the pyramid makes it to the top, right? So that's something you need to keep in mind about going from PM to VC. One thing you can do though is if you rise up the PM ladder to like VP of product, and then you can maybe come in as a VC partner directly, right? So that's something that you need to keep in mind. The longer you wait, the better results you have when you transfer over to VC. Entrepreneur. PMs usually go to become a founding CEO, not like a founding engineer of a startup. And yeah, like the goal is to make a lot of money at an exit when it gets acquired or IPOs. So that's like the 4th path right there. Now we're going to cover entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, you can be a serial entrepreneur. These people are one of the most respected in society. They start a company, it gets bought out by a giant. They go back to starting another company, it gets bought out again. And they're just super successful. Not all their startups have exits, right? Some of them don't get bought out, but a lot of them do. And an example of that is the founders of Cisco Meraki, right? They started Meraki, which then got acquired for a 9-figure exit number, which was just $1 billion plus. And after they essentially kept building that up and making it one of probably the most hype sub-organization within Cisco, they left to start something else called Samsara. The moment they started Samsara, it automatically became a hyper growth. Every investor was begging them, hey, please let us invest. Like, Sequoia Capital, Greylock, Excel, they all wanted to invest in these founders, right? Because whatever they do, it gets acquired, it gets bought out. So they instantly got a ton of funding, and Samsara was instantly put on the top of all those hyper growth startup lists. Everyone wanted to work for them. They were poaching people from Google, Facebook, people from like those companies just instantly leaving their jobs if they got an offer at Samsara. And guess what? Now it's huge and expected to have another huge exit. It's an example of a serial entrepreneur. And I think that those people have the most clout in society. They can be a VC investor if they want. They just want to keep on starting businesses, getting them to like billion-dollar businesses, and just like starting over again when they get spot out, right? Long-time CEO. Entrepreneur, you stay with a company, you turn down all acquisition offers. You say, hey, like, okay, I don't want this like 10 mil for you to acquire me. I think this company can become like a $300 million company, and you just keep on growing it. And then it IPOs, right? When IPOs generally like it has like some public buy-in, people kind of know about it, right? Like Uber and Lyft are easier to IPO because everyone has taken an Uber or Lyft, right? Whereas things that are more B2B SaaS, like not as much, right? So yeah, so when your company IPOs, you can then be like one of those large CEOs like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and there's a lot of clout associated with this. But again, it takes a lot of time for you to build your company up to something like Facebook, especially like when you're like the CEO. You have to stick with it for a while, right? It'll take a while before like your company gets traction in many cases. So long-time CEO is also another option. PM, a lot of entrepreneurs go to become a PM. Usually I don't see entrepreneurs like without an exit. Like if you don't have like an acquisition, it's tough to just become like a high level PM, right? You just have to like start off as a normal PM and work your way up, right? So in a sense, if you know that's your path, just join PM right now. EIR, these people are like one of the smartest in society. When there's entrepreneurs that sometimes are serial entrepreneurs or they're just like starting companies and the companies are just getting like good traction, what happens is VC firms want them to just ideate on whiteboards. A lot of these guys are just like they're just like EECS or CS from MIT, right? And they already like started a couple of like really technical things, and entrepreneurs kind of catch wind of this. I mean, VC firms catch wind of this. Like, yo, this guy is an absolute genius. We want him to like be in residence and just generate a lot of ideas for us. So what they do is they put a couple of those MIT guys on whiteboards, and they just tell them to like brainstorm kind of all day, and they're kind of like watching some of these ideas. And they're like, that's a good one. We'll instantly fund you and just go build it out. And a lot of those EIRs actually turn into founders that have like really good exits because they're like the sharpest in society. And because they're so smart and they've seen so many different, a lot of times they're like PhDs too. They've seen like so many different verticals and the gaps in those verticals. They know exactly which opportunity to attack and kind of like use that as like a product on its own. So EIRs are basically hackers and geeks that are at VC firms, and whenever they have an idea that the VC firm likes, they'll fund them and give them all these people that have like the business knowledge, and that startup will be good, right? So EIR, that's actually again one of the most respected positions in society. They only take 1 or 2 at these top VC firms a year, and these people have like very strictly vetted, right? It's literally something that a lot of VC firms don't even have. It's just on like a need basis kind of, or if someone really stands out. Okay, VC investor. This is the fastest path to become an investor. Be an entrepreneur that's successful, right? Have like a really solid exit, not something that's like a 4-figure exit. Like, oh, my startup got acquired for like $1,000, right? Like that won't allow you to go into at the partner level. The more digits your exit is, like let's say my example of like the Sam Sarah and Cisco Meraki, like 9-figure exit each time, right? Those founders, they can come in as a partner easy, right? Even if you have like a smaller exit too, the fact that you've been an entrepreneur, you've done everything as an entrepreneur, they'll trust you more to invest in those entrepreneurs in the future at a VC firm because you've been where they were. Whereas if you're coming as a PM, they're like, oh, this guy just worked a corporate job. It's not the same. So the quickest way to be an investor that writes checks at the partner level is to be an entrepreneur yourself. And this is what every VC partner will tell you. I've interviewed like a bunch of them, gotten on a lot of calls with them. I've even scouted for like a lot of top VC partners in the Bay, and they've always said the same thing, right? So that's the exit path for that. And lastly, this is one of the last things we'll discuss, consultant. I didn't write the entire flow out because I'm assuming a lot of people have kind of gotten like the format before, right? So when you're a consultant, you can go partner track. You can just rise up from analyst to senior analyst to consultant to senior consultant to sometimes it's called like principal, right? Or senior principal, and then partner, and then like general partner, and then MD. That's kind of like how the consulting and investment banking and private equity and sometimes venture capital structure is structured as well. So partner track. And here's the thing about consulting and IB. They don't take everyone that's like an analyst to become a consultant. They don't take everyone that's a consultant to go to the partner track. To be partner track, you have to be top 10% of your batch. So here's the thing. Number 2 through 5, people who do that not out of choice. It's because they're just, not solid enough to make the partner track. And typically, if you are solid enough to make partner track and people get wind of that, then you just get like a recommendation letter from partner, and you can typically get like a Harvard or Stanford MBA because that shows you the top 10% at like Bain out of all the consultants, or the top 10% at like Goldman, right? Or not Goldman. I mean, I meant like McKinsey. So yeah, that's the partner track. It's just staying in the same firm, and usually partners at consulting firms or other firms have been there for 20, 30 years. They just keep getting promoted. And I mean, I don't know the reason why they don't hop from firms to firms. I'm not too knowledgeable in the space. Maybe it looks bad to just like hop around in that space. Big tech. A lot of consultants go into strategy and operations, strategy alone, operations alone. If you're in strategy and you come as a consultant, that's a pretty high position because again, you're kind of, how the engineers did this, you're kind of deciding like the strategy and like the not the architecture, but kind of like you're deciding things that other people will implement. So of course you're going to be kind of like respected and high level. So that's a really good move for consultants, especially if they can thrive in that vertical within like Google or Facebook. PM. Consultants want to break into PM, but that's tough. You need to have like some technical knowledge, and you also have to, typically a lot of PMs are taken from good schools that have like a lot of good technical degrees like CS, data science, or math and stats. And brand names are pretty important to break into these APM programs. So if consultants can't break into PM later on, what they do is they get an MBA and use an MBA to change their career and then go into product management, or to go into these two right here: private equity and venture capital. So as you can see, consultants, their exit opportunities are completely non-technical because they're non-technical to start with. A lot of them are economics majors, and a lot of them are sometimes like even like English majors become consultants, right? It doesn't require technical understanding. And a lot of the time, consultants, like they chase positions like in private equity and venture capital. And since PM, private equity and venture capital are tough to get if you've never had any experience in that, it's like one of those loops where you just have to break in. Otherwise, no one will give you any attention. You need to get an MBA from a good school to, number one, change careers. And number two, it's like boost your resume and show them, hey, can I break into like your VC firm now, right? So people get like a Harvard MBA, Wharton MBA, Stanford MBA, or like if you're trying to go for a tech position, like, MIT Sloan's tech MBA. And what they do afterwards is then they can come into a private equity firm as a private equity associate investor, right? So you still have to go from associate to principal and principal to partner, but they use MBAs to break into private equity. They use MBAs to break into venture capital. They also come at the associate level, and they use MBAs to break into PM, where they just become like a normal PM, but still, hey, like a PM's a job that is highly lucrative right now. Everyone wants it. And you got to interface with engineers, but you're not actually writing code, right? So you're chilling in a sense. And you also have like good influence, and you have all of those exit opportunities that I told you about over here, right? So this is like why consultants typically do what they do. And I'm open to questions. Hopefully that was useful. We're done.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, Hamza, first of all, thank you so much for your time, man. Definitely just kind of, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on this that I already knew prior to coming in, but there's a lot of details that you mentioned that I think were super useful. Definitely going into like the nitty gritty of like basically each position and each workflow, and each kind of like path for the different positions. So that's definitely super appreciated. I think we have just two questions from the attendees. One of them is, I believe this person's asking if there are any differences in the ladder when working at a defense-like company. So I think they mentioned that they're not sure if you can answer this, but if you have any sort of knowledge on this, if you can kind of give some insight.
Defense company, like the way did you hear that right? Defense.
Yeah, defense company. Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I don't have any knowledge on that. If it's a large company, it'll have a more stratified and more hierarchical structure. You'll see more of those levels out of like those 9 levels that you saw there, from software engineer to CTO. If it's smaller, right, there may be like smaller defense companies. It may have like half of those. So typically the company size determines those levels. And again, the names are variable, but generally the concepts are the same. So for software engineer to architect, sometimes instead of calling it principal engineer or architect, they'll just call you like fellow, like engineering fellow. That's like the highest title. And it switches around, but generally the concepts are the same. So I can share these slides afterwards, or I can make them public and like share the URL with the team, and they can share it with you. And yeah, I don't know specifically, but just make sure like you kind of know what people at each level do, and it won't be too different there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. And then we have another really good question. So Shams asked what the educational path or major is to PM. So like what kind of, I guess, what kind of majors do people usually or have when they're PMs, and then also like what kind of internships they do when they're in school.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I could talk for hours on breaking into PM. This is something that a lot of people have asked me about. So with PM, the job itself is not that difficult. I'm being honest with you. It's not like doing software engineering on a very difficult technical project where you have to, kind of make something that maybe has not been made before. With PM, all you're doing is telling those guys what to do. And those guys that you're telling what to do, they're pretty smart. Like they can execute things. You just have to give them some direction, some clarity. And you kind of just have to make sure that you are constantly checking in on them. You're owning the product. You have the ownership. So basically you can do the job from any major, but breaking in is the difficult part. So here's the thing. you can do the job from any major, but you're talking with engineers and you're talking with designers. With us, like, it's intuitive that if you have like a computer science degree or a data science degree and something that touches on design, right? Like sometimes there's even like a design major or like some information or like business has like design classes within it sometimes. So if you have both of those, then, you know, it would seem to be like that you're unstoppable when it comes to like having the perfect profile for PM. And you're absolutely correct. CS and business is like an amazing combination, and people typically will not just like overlook you because of that, right? They'll actually like look at your majors and be like, that's a check. We'll move on to like the next aspect of his resume or profile. And sometimes just that alone, if you're like at a solid school, if you do both of those, will get you in. Here's the thing: I didn't do that, but I showed on my resume that I have the speaking skills, the business acumen, without having to be like a full-on business major, right? There's many ways you can show that. You can just show that you're like a president of like a student club. You can show that you did consulting for a bit. You can just show anything that denotes that you have leadership experience or speaking experience or public speaking experience, right? You can just say I give a TED talk or I give a keynote here and there. And that shows people that you're not awkward, and they won't think of you as just like, let's say, a software engineer if that's what you did previously in your internships. So a lot of things that you can do to set yourself up for PM. In terms of like the academic background, to answer your question, Shems, or the main part of your question, do something technical, right? You're going to be talking with engineers. You don't want to be like an English major that's just saying like, oh, I can learn on the job, right? You want to prove to them, like, anyone can learn on the job. Anyone can. Might as well start from up here because you already know like CS. All you have to do is like learn that specific like service they're using, and you can literally like, run that PM position. You can tell them, hey, like, I've actually worked on this like in a project like in CS at Berkeley, and we did it this way. Maybe try it that way. And they'll be so impressed, and you'll have the respect. If you just have a CS major, like right off the bat, you'll have the respect. If you have a CS major and some technical internships, you'll have all those engineers respect even more. Sometimes to the point where you can correct some of their mistakes, and that's just like that's awesome. So I would say have a technical major, and then you can pair that with something else. Business helps, but sometimes it's hard to like double. It takes a lot of time. You don't want to do that. So CS major and show them that you have business acumen. How do you set your resume up for PM? That's a good question. A lot of the times they just won't let you break in, or a lot of engineers won't give you, a lot of recruiters, will not give you an interview because there's so many applicants, and they only want to give interviews to the people who have already done PM positions. Somehow have finessed like a sophomore level associate product manager position, or like a technical PM program manager position. They'll give those people interviews over you if you're like a software engineering intern. Although I argue that if you're a good software engineering intern, you can make a better PM those people that have done like project management. So how do you break in? You need to show them that you've already been a PM in the past. It doesn't have to be at a company. You can be a PM of like your own startup, right? Just like put that down and just start doing it, start actually building a product. Go from an idea to something that's actually launched. It doesn't have to be something that requires code too. You can just like be a PM of like a, I don't know, of something that you can make like apps with Google Sheets, right? You can make apps like that are like drag and drop, or even make websites. But if the website is for a good purpose and you're solving like a user pain point or a problem, you are a PM of that. And that's like a solid resume point that if you combine that with something technical earlier, nothing's stopping you. So remember, you need to have technical skills and like just people skills. And you combine that and you're like the perfect candidate for PM. There's a lot more I can talk about, but Shems, do you have a follow-up?
Also,
Okay.
while he may or may not be typing, I don't know if I'm putting you in trouble by doing this, but I know that Hamza is definitely very what's the word? He's very interactive on his LinkedIn. He likes to connect with a lot of people, and he definitely has a lot of posts that are pretty insightful. And so, if you want more information about, I guess, PM specifically through his LinkedIn, or just kind of like being new in like the workspace and how to kind of basically build up your resume or build up your experience, definitely add him on LinkedIn and kind of reach out to him. There's no guarantee. Again, I don't want to get him in trouble for saying this. I don't want to guarantee that he'll get back to you, but I know that I've personally had a lot of chats with him, and it's definitely helpful getting a lot of insight from him. So definitely reach out if you can, if you have any other like more kind of one-on-one type questions for him.
Yep.
And I think Shams is good on the follow-up. So I think with that being said, we're actually out of time as well too. But I just want to say again, thank you so much, Shams. I mean, sorry, not Shams, Hamza, for doing this. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. There's a lot that, again, like I said, I knew from from our conversations and stuff about product management going into this, but there's a lot that you mentioned that I actually like wasn't aware of. So thank you so much again for the details that you went into as well. And yeah, Jazakallah khair, man. We appreciate it. To all the hackers who are participating, good luck on the rest of hacking. We're all excited to see what you guys come up with next weekend, inshallah. And yeah, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Take care. Jazakallah khair again, Hamza. Take care, man.
Of course, pleasure was mine. Thanks so much, man. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikum assalam.